And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vâlsan, broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. As always, alongside with me is Herr Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer, James Huff, making sure everything works just fine, broadcasting from the States. Greetings, Jon.
Hello there. How are you doing?
Doing fine for this rather extraordinary show. We couldn't hold it on Friday, so this is rather extraordinary to hold it on Monday evening. But yeah, other than that, I'm enjoying the weather. It's gotten progressively better, and we finally got rid of the rain, and it's getting warmer and warmer. So overall, doing great.
Yeah, it's just started raining again in Germany. Most of the week's been fine, but now like today it started raining again. In other news, I hear the French have decided to choose cancer over AIDS. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, something to that effect. I mean, I wouldn't have wished to be a Frenchman yesterday, basically on Sunday. I just wouldn't wish to be a Frenchman. Um, in the first round, I had a preferred candidate, but in the second round, I was like, really? Does one really have to go and face these two choices? I mean, can you get worse than that? Well, actually, I could. I mean, the worst case scenario would have been a final between Mélenchon and Le Pen. Now that would have been a serious problem. But nevertheless, the second worst combination was this one. Yeah, Macron versus Le Pen. I think I said in several videos that I would have voted Le Pen, but by holding my nose and um, if I had been religious, ask for forgiveness. I'm not religious, but I would have still felt a stain upon me for voting Le Pen. But you know, it's just a tough call, isn't it? I mean, whichever that's why I titled my last video on the French elections. Whatever the French choose, they'll regret it.
Yeah, I really feel that Macron is not as bad as Le Pen in terms of policies, but he's more likely to actually get things done. So it's really hard to say, but I would have, if I were French, I would have probably abstained from voting. But if I were forced to vote, I probably would have voted for Macron. Also holding my nose, but I don't know. It's tough to say.
There were like 4 million blank votes, so it's not like it was a very outside the norm opinion to just simply
Yep.
protest the choices themselves. But yeah, this was my only argument for Le Pen. Because against both of them, I can make a very convincing case. But for Le Pen, this was my only argument. She would not have gotten a majority in the parliament. Therefore, she would have gotten a hostile parliament and be forced into a cohabitation agreement, which meant essentially gridlock. I mean, most of the things she wanted to do, she could not do it. And gridlock is preferable to progress towards insanity. Whereas Macron will probably get support in the parliament for most of his policies. And I agree, some of his policies aren't really that cancer, but many are. And knowing especially the National Assembly, the Senate is a bit more moderate, but knowing the French National Assembly, I will suspect that exactly his cancerous policies will get the most support in the parliament, and the more sane ones will be harder to push through, or even will not be able to be. He won't be able to push them through.
Yeah, it's quite a sad state of affairs.
It is. It is. It is no secret I shilled for François Fillon, but then completely unsurprisingly, I guess they basically manufactured a corruption scandal for him, which suddenly died after he he was eliminated from the race. So pretty much reinforces my suspicion from 3 months ago that it's basically a fake scandal. Uh, so yeah, I don't know. I find it harder and harder not to at least consider that someone or a group of someone's actually wanted these two insane choices on the ballot rather than some rather less insane choices.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think if you can explain something with stupidity
Stupidity.
rather than
Yeah.
malice, then that should be the preferred choice.
Yeah, it still is my preferred choice, but nevertheless, it just falls so wrongly into place. One cannot stop wondering. But yeah, I guess stupidity just explains it better. And also, there is this business that pretty much exists in most of Europe, but most of Europe doesn't actually abide by it, but the French actually do, which is that the electoral campaign ends on Friday at midnight, so you're not allowed to talk about the elections on Saturday and Sunday. So when the Macron leaks hit, the French media was ordered by the state not to cover them. Various independent journalists from France were just, hopping on a plane going to Brussels and covering them from there. Because the French law still doesn't apply in Belgium, although I'm sure that many people are very upset by that. But
Only a
yeah,
matter of time.
it's only a matter of time, I guess. Yeah, the greater France is coming. But no, seriously, I mean, everything that could go wrong in this French election cycle did go wrong. Almost everything that could go wrong, um, and up to and including this I would say extreme zeal of the authorities. In the middle of the elections, they charged Le Pen with the. I mean, she has a lot of sins, but you charge her of the least relevant one. Hate speech, which probably increased her polling by quite a bit. Then they block the media from reporting about a story that may or may not have been extremely substantive, but nevertheless forbidding the press to even talk about it at all. Uh, that seems mildly uncivilized by my tastes. So yeah, everything that could go wrong in this cycle did go wrong.
Yeah.
All right, I really don't know what else to say. I mean, it just sucks.
Yeah, and
Anyway,
it's
go ahead.
in slightly happier news. There's been an election in Schleswig-Holstein, in one of the German states, on Sunday as well, with some better results. CDU gained some ground, FDP gained some ground, SPD lost some ground. It seems like, and then it's not like I support these two parties, but at least like they're not as bad as the alternative. So that's a small win, I guess.
It is. It is. I mean, if it's not SPD, it's at least a quarter good news. Yeah. I guess we'll see. When are the federal elections scheduled? I keep on forgetting this.
I believe it's in September. I'm not actually 100% sure.
Yeah, September 24th. Well, there's still time. Many things can change, but um, in a way, even though I cringe every time I watch video clips from Germany, in a way, I hope the SPD doesn't drop Schultz and they keep on doubling down on hyping up Schultz, because that could at the very least ensure that they won't get too many votes.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like if anything, Schulz has really helped them. Since Schulz became the official candidate, they've gained quite a bit in the polls. So it, they've dropped some from the height of the like Schulz hype after the announcement the couple of weeks after that, but they're still above where they used to be. So I don't think Schulz is hurting them in any way.
Yeah, well, but then again, there are still 4 more months, over 4 months. I mean, it's May the 8th today, so there's still over 4 months till the elections. Many things could change. And I really hope many things do change. I really hope, although maybe I'm a bit too optimistic, but I really hope some partisan hacks do emerge on the non-socialist side as well, because on the socialist side, there's just too many of them, I guess. I mean, someone's got to go after this guy and start digging up dirt on him. It's amazing that nobody did so far.
Yeah, I wouldn't call the SPD socialist party. They're really not. They're like slightly more to the left than the CDU, but it's really not like a huge difference.
I guess the biggest difference is probably in social policy than in economics.
Yeah, even that it's not that big. I mean, it's sort of getting big in the last couple of years, but sort of from basically from the Schröder years. Basically, under Schröder, the SPD moved more to the right, to the center, and under Merkel, the CDU moved more to the left, to the center, and they've like
They kind of
somewhere
morphed.
around like I don't know, 8 years or so ago, they were basically at the same position, more or less. And since then, they've drifted apart a little bit, but they're still pretty close in terms of most of their outlooks. I mean, they've been in the same government for quite a while now. So
Yeah, I get cozy with that. That's why I always smile when I see smaller parties like the FDP or the AFD gaining some ground, because someone needs to shake things up a little bit.
yeah, during the
Go ahead.
last 12 years, there's been 8 years where they're both part of the same government. So
Mhm.
there's
Mhm.
not really that much room for disagreement there.
Yeah, and I don't think that's healthy. I mean, it's getting into a very ossified establishment. So
Yeah, and there's a
I'm not
pretty good
convinced.
chance that. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm not convinced that that's healthy over the long run, and it's much more healthy to have smaller parties shaking things up, pretty much in any direction at this moment. At the very least, there has to be some sort of disagreement.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it looks like we're going to get another grand coalition as far as the
Yeah,
polls stand right now. That's by far the most likely outcome.
yeah, yeah. It's probably going to be, but it matters if the Grand Coalition has 52% or 65.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. All right. Current politics aside, let's go to even more current politics. I apologize for the source of this first article, but it's basically I was lazy to translate from Swedish, so I found this one that was already translated, so I picked this one. But the piece of news is legit, coming from the oldcontinent.eu. Sweden's first feminist government admits it did not vote against Saudi Arabia entering the UN's Women's Rights Commission. Of the UN's 54 nation Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, could it be called INGSOC? 47 voted yes by a secret ballot last week to elect Saudi Arabia to the UN Women's Commission. 7 countries abstained from voting, which means none of the countries voted no to appointing a country which has, according to UN Watch, the world's most misogynistic regime. Amongst the abstainers, Sweden, which prides itself on having the world's first feminist government. Press Secretary Erik Wirkenshö, the Sweden's Foreign Minister Margot Wallström, defending the action by stating that, quote, there isn't a no option. You may either vote or abstain. With this election, it wouldn't have mattered if Sweden voted in favor or abstained. So much for remorse. Belgium's Prime Minister, Charles Michel, for instance, at least regretted that Belgium voted yes. If we could do it this again, would the government would have argued that there is no support and there is no doubt about it. I regret the election. Sweden's feminist government was already criticized for throwing away their ideals when they visited Iran last February. A number of female officials who joined the trip, including Trade Minister Anne Linde, chose to wear Islamic headscarves. And now the feminists again prove themselves to be flimsy in their beliefs. Saudi Arabia has long been Sweden's most important trading partner in the Middle East, with exports worth around 10 billion per year, and that seems more important than ethics. Hille Neuer, executive director of UN Watch, said, quote, the UN has sent a message that women's rights can be sold out for petrodollars and politics and let it down millions of female victims worldwide who look to the world body for protection. There it is, another great day for feminism. A government that thinks it would not have mattered if it would have voted yes or abstained, and apparently never thought about the option number 3, walk away from the table and alert the media to prevent the secret vote from happening. So, to be frank with you, I'm not that particularly that upset, because I don't think the UN has any value whatsoever, and especially the UN's Women's Rights Commission. So I'm not particularly that upset, but it's still funny to watch, um, you know, feminists hitting against real world, basically.
Yeah, same here. It's not hugely important. The UN is basically a glorified debating society, and this women's council even more so. But it is somewhat hypocritical. But then, of course, I don't really expect anything different from feminists, especially Swedish feminists. I mean, it's long been established that Muslims definitely rank above women in the progressive stack. So
Yeah.
if you if you insist on keeping Saudi Arabia out, that would be racist or something, probably.
Yeah. It is still nevertheless a real life issue. Feminism hitting real life. I mean, at the end of the day, um, I presume that maybe not the politicians themselves, but the people who counsel them. If you want, the Swedish deep state basically told them, look, this women's rights council matters not at all. It's completely irrelevant. Whereas the billions upon billions of shekels that we make with Saudi Arabia tend to actually matter because someone needs to pay for that welfare state. So at the end of the day, you're not going to make a big fuss about it because nothing really happens if you abstain. Um,
Yep.
so basically they just had to hit the real world where in real world you sometimes have to make quote unquote unethical decisions, although again I'm not particularly convinced that this is necessarily unethical because the UN, as you said, is a glorified debate society. So who sits on various sub boards of a glorified debate society doesn't strike me as something really important.
Yeah, this is what they're talking about in this article, that there is no option to abstain. That's of course bullshit. It's just
Vote no, there is no option to vote no, that's what they
yeah,
say.
you can vote no.
Yeah, of course, it's nonsense. You can vote no, and like the editor of this particular, admittedly very partisan article says, uh, there is also the option to walk away from the table and cry to the media and mount a campaign and whatnot. I mean, come on, you're the foreign minister of Sweden. You're not the random homeless Joe from Stockholm. So I mean, you can do things, uh, but then again, they just had to hit the real world.
Yep.
All right, staying in the Islamophobia territory. Go ahead.
This one is from the Icelandic archives once again. Austrian president calls on all women to wear headscarves in solidarity with Muslims to fight, quote, rampant Islamophobia. The president of Austria has called for all women to wear headscarves in solidarity with Muslims to fight rampant Islamophobia. Alexander van der Bellen, the left-wing former Green Party leader who narrowly beat a far-right candidate to take office in January, said freedom of expression was a fundamental right. Quote, "It is every woman's right to always dress how she wants. That is my opinion on the matter," he told an audience of school pupils. And it's not only Muslim women, all women can wear a headscarf. And if this real and rampant Islamophobia continues, there will come a day where we must ask all women to wear a headscarf. All, out of solidarity to those who do it for religious reasons. Mr. van der Bellen was responding to a question from a schoolgirl who argued a ban on Islamic headscarves in Wales would reduce women to their appearance rather than accomplishments and shut some out of the labour market. His comments were made in March, but emerged after being broadcast on Austrian television amid debate in the country and neighboring Germany about burqa bans. A spokesperson said that following ISIS-linked terror attacks across Europe, Mr. van der Bellen would like to see Muslim representatives in Austria make clearer statements, emphasizing that the atrocities could not be justified within Islam. He also warned against racism from the other side, giving the example of a Muslim taxi driver refusing to take Orthodox Jews. A statement said, adding, "This is absolutely unacceptable." The president's office said he believed prohibitions were only justified in select circumstances, such as for female judges, where religious dress could raise questions over their professional neutrality. Mr. van der Bellen would apply any restrictions to all religious symbols equally, including Christian crosses and Jewish kippas. Despite the president's left-wing background, the Austrian government is a coalition between the centrist Social Democratic Party and conservative Austrian People's Party. The Populist Freedom Party of Austria has pushed for policies including a partial ban on full-face Islamic veils in courts, schools, and other public places, which was announced in January. The partial prohibition, which has not yet come into effect, would apply to the niqab and burqa, but not headscarves, hijabs, which cover the hair and neck only. But the government also agreed to prevent police officers, judges, magistrates, and public prosecutors from wearing headscarves in the interest of appearing ideologically and religiously neutral. Thousands of people took Vienna streets to protest the proposed legislation, which was dismissed as a knee-jerk reaction to appease the far right as the coalition floundered. Debates over restrictions on Islamic veils have reignited in Europe following a wave of terror attacks and the refugee crisis, which sparked concerns over integration. The German parliament voted in support of a draft law banning women working in the civil service, judiciary, and military from wearing the burqa and niqab on Thursday. Thomas de Maizière, the German interior minister, argued that the ban was compatible with integration, which, quote, means that we should make clear and impart our values and where the boundaries of our tolerance towards other cultures lie. Angela Merkel announced her support for the move in December, saying full face veils were, quote, not acceptable in Germany, and calling them to be banned wherever it is legally possible. Dutch MPs voted for a similar prohibition in the Netherlands last year, covering public transport, education, healthcare, and government buildings, and punishing any infractions with fines. Support for bans on full face veils has been growing across Europe since France became the first country to implement such a law in 2011, followed by countries including Belgium and Bulgaria, with partial bans being imposed in Austria and parts of Spain, Italy, and Switzerland.
So women can wear whatever they please until the government decides that they need to wear whatever the government wants in order to combat Islamophobia. Am I reading this right?
It's really a bizarre statement.
I mean, what's wrong with these politicians? Why can't they just say, "Look, I've made a mistake. I misspoke. I apologize." Period. End of story. But instead, he doubles down on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such an insane idea. Like on the one hand, he says that women should wear whatever they want. On the other hand, he says that they maybe don't have to, but they really should all wear the veil to in like solidarity or something. Like, what kind of bullshit is that?
Yeah, and I really need to mention this particular bit of hypocrisy. Oh, the left-wing former Green Party who narrowly beat the far-right candidate. No, no. This is a far-left candidate. I mean, the only political figure that I can think of that is further to the left of von der Bellen would be, I guess, Lenin. But that would be pretty much it. I mean, it is very interesting. Whenever communists get into office or whenever a communist speaks for whatever reason, you never see in the press, the far left figure, whatever, said whatever. You always see how the left leaning, or sometimes you even don't have a description at all. I mean, at least this article tries to describe, although a bit disingenuous, but at least tries to. It's as if there's normal people who, by coincidence, always happen to be communists or leftists, and then there's conservatives who are always evil and always oppose normal people. No, I'm sorry. This dude is a communist. He's born in the Soviet Union. He is a communist by deed and action and statements and anything. I mean, I have yet to hear or read any statement by Alexander van der Bellen that is not collectivistic in nature, and this one is no exception. In out of solidarity for everyone else, we're gonna force all women to wear veils. How about go fuck yourself? Just saying.
Yeah, it's I guess this sort of disparity that they always refer to anyone on the right, or like almost anyone on the right, as a far right person, and far left people are just like left-leaning people or left-wing people. I guess that's because most journalists are pretty far to the left.
Yeah.
So, but like from their perspective, from their sort of neutral standpoint, it's already quite far on the left. And if someone is an actual socialist or communist, he's not actually that far removed from them ideologically. So, I guess it's just a case of their sense of being a lot farther left than that of most people.
Yeah.
I guess there's like no like real like neutral ground on left to right axis. I mean, lots of things. People who are who are right wing today, if they had the same views 200 years ago, they would be left wing. Things change a lot in that perspective, and it just always sort of depends on where your base level is. And apparently, for journalists, it's quite a bit farther to the left than for most other people.
Yeah. Too bad I can't put images in this podcast because there is a good meme It's usually labeled like that, the political spectrum for journalists and academics, and it's basically the two-axis spectrum. And on the very upper left corner, the authoritarian left, there's four squares, and it says on green background, peace and love, and the rest of the spectrum is with red and it says far right. That's pretty much how many of these journalists and academics seem to view things, don't they? Of course,
Yeah,
that's
and
a little bit exaggerated, because it's a meme, but nevertheless, I mean, it just kind of seems like that.
yeah, and I mean the FPÖ, they are a right-wing party, but they're not far right, not really. And
No, not really. And
they're
some of
certainly
their,
not as far right as Van der Bellen is left.
yeah, 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 that's definitely true. I mean, the FPO even have some economic policies that could very well be described as social democratic. And the fact that they want to put some limits on the welfare state and maybe cap some spending and whatnot, and they have some ideas that civilization needs to be preserved by upholding some values and defending them even by force if necessary. You can say they're a bit authoritarian, but to call them far right is just disingenuous.
Hmm.
And Hofer himself is a very charismatic dude. I mean, even when you disagree with him, you can't really hate him unless you're a social justice warrior, I guess.
You don't actually have to be an SJW, you just have to be like
Or a journalist.
a normal blue-pilled person in a German-speaking world. That's basically enough.
Fair enough. Fair enough, I
Because
guess.
I mean, with this whole history of National Socialism, there isn't really a just a neutral right wing in Germany in terms of like most people's opinion. That you have like you have the like far left, you have the left, you have the center, and then you have the far right. Again, people often don't even talk about the far right; just say the right, and the right means far right. Right means Nazi, basically.
Yeah, sooner or later, and I don't know, maybe I'm a bit too optimistic, but sooner or later, these things will have to change as the generations change. Because it's going to be harder and harder to uphold this narrative with people, born in, let's say, 2000, who will have a right to vote next year. Uh, it's very hard to tell them, oh, look, this is the narrative because 65 years before you were born or 55 years before you were born, these things happen. It's going to be very hard to logically uphold this particular kind of narrative. It was much
Yep.
easier in the 70s and 80s, but will be much harder as this century progresses.
Yep.
And also the political party that is in the coalition government, they call it here the conservative, or sorry, the Austrian People's Party. Those guys don't have really that much different ideas from the FPO. So either Austria is a far right country because it has quote unquote the far right in the government, or the journalists are full of shit. Uh, Probably the journalists are full of shit.
Yeah, like basically, if you want to equate it in terms of the equivalent German parties, the party that's in power right now is basically like the CDU, and FPÖ is sort of like the AfD,
Yeah.
uh, quite similar in terms of ideologies and
Mhm.
political positions.
Yeah, although I would argue that the AFD is a bit more capitalistic than FPO, so
Yeah, that's a fair point.
yeah, so the FPO isn't even right wing enough on economics, which is a bit sad for me, but which makes the journalist's point even more disingenuous.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of economics, the sort of political spectrum gets a bit screwy because I mean, Nazis are typically considered far right, but in terms of actual economic policies, they were actually quite moderate. They were
Social
like
democrats.
social democrats, basically,
Yep.
in terms of
All
economics.
right, let's go to the next one. The next one is very interesting.
Okay, the next one is from the BBC, but it's about Germany. German male escorts data hidden from paternity suit woman. A woman who got pregnant after having sex with a male escort in a German hotel has failed in a legal battle to find out his name. The hotel, where they spent 3 nights in 2010 in the city of Halle, does not have to tell her the man's name, a court in Munich ruled. The man's right to privacy outweighed the woman's claim for child support payments from him, the ruling said. She knew him as Michael, but the three other Michaels were also at the hotel. Each of the four Michaels had a right to, quote, control their own data and protect their own marriage and family, the ruling said. The case was heard at the Munich District Court because the hotel chain is based in the Bavarian city. Halle is in eastern Germany. The woman, not named in the case, said she had got pregnant after staying with Michael in a room on the second floor. She now has a 7-year-old son called Joel. The court decided that her lack of detail about the man raised the risk of personal data, quote, simply being released at random. Quote continues, nor is it certain that the Christian name is indeed the name of the man in question, the court said. German privacy laws are among the strictest in Europe. It is partly a legacy of history. Under the Nazis, then later under the communist East German regime, there was intrusive mass surveillance with grievous human rights abuses. The Munich Appeal Court backed the verdict and decided not to review the case, a court spokeswoman told the BBC. The case is now closed in terms of German civil law, she added. Now, in addendum to that, I've looked at some German versions of this story, and in none of the German versions are they talking anything about the man being an escort. So probably it's just like a normal man. For example, in one story in German, it was called he was referred to as ihr Begleiter, which could be translated as her escort, but Begleiter doesn't imply anything about being
It's
a prostitute. Basically, I mean, escort
yeah.
is like a euphemism for prostitute, and also they talk about protecting the data and the marriage and family of these four Michaels, which wouldn't make a lot of sense if they're escorts. I mean, presumably they're not hiding the fact that they're escorts from their wives, but if it was like just a normal man, that would make sense that he might be married and having an affair. So that's why I believe that it was not actually an escort.
I
Just
see.
like someone she picked up at a bar or whatever.
I see. Well, it kind of does matter if it was an escort or not, because if it was an escort, the verdict absolutely does make sense. I mean, uh, at the end of the day, there are some responsibilities when you contract a service. Whereas if he wasn't, well, I'm not so convinced that it's such a decent verdict. Maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe privacy shouldn't outweigh not her right for child support, but the right of the child to meet his father. Um, because if it is on terms of child support, yeah, maybe, I don't know. But at the end of the day, the kid deserves to know his father. It's just a way by
Yeah,
kind of
but
look at. Go ahead.
why should the hotel have some sort of duty to disclose that information?
Absolutely no, the hotel shouldn't have the. But if indeed it was an escort, I don't think it is that particular hotel the only one that holds the information. If indeed it was the case that this dude was an escort, he probably still works in the area, so it's not particularly hard to find out if indeed that is the that is the issue. I mean, in the over the course of 7 years, what the hell did she do? How
Yeah,
big is
I don't know,
how big is
maybe
Holly?
like engaged in a very lengthy civil suit. I don't know if it would take that long, but
Holly is 236,000 inhabitants. So that's about that's smaller than the town I grew up in between the ages of 2 and 7. And finding out who is an escort and what is the name of the escort in a town that big uh, could take up to 3 weeks without the internet. If you have the internet and you're in that city, it shouldn't take more than a week on your own. Yeah, sure, but I mean, on a lengthy civil suit, not only you can lose it, but it takes 7 years.
yeah,
Hey, I mean, if she really wanted that information uh, for herself, but obviously she didn't. She wanted to extort money from the guy, and in which case, yeah, I'm not really that sympathetic to her.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be careful. The suit is not about the right of the child or the mother to know, um, but it's about whether the hotel has an obligation to disclose that sort of information,
Yeah.
and that the
Yes.
court has said it doesn't, and that's, I think, entirely correct,
Yeah.
whether he's an
Yeah.
escort or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I don't know. Staying at a hotel used to be, at least in the past, you would go there, in part to get a bit of anonymity and privacy, because nobody would know you amongst the staff and things like that. And it would be preferable to stay that way. As for the sort of background story offered by the BBC, Germany privacy laws are among the strictest in Europe. Yeah, maybe. It's the legacy because of the National Socialists and the International Socialists, where there was intrusive mass surveillance. Yeah, that implies that such thing doesn't happen now, when in fact you have the Bundespolizei knocking at your door because you wrote a politically incorrect anonymous comment on Facebook about immigration and cultural enrichment 3 days ago. So, yeah, come on, BBC, try to be a little bit less disingenuous. Or I guess I'm being overly optimistic with that claim.
I mean, that's sort of a strong concern about privacy in Germany, much stronger than in most other Western countries.
Mhm.
But and then I guess of the laws are also stricter, but like in terms of the actual data that's collected by like various government agencies, there's probably not too much of a difference between Germany and other European countries.
Yeah, and purely on technical terms, probably the German government collects more data today than the East German one used to do in the 80s. Uh, because if the Stasi wanted to know everything you would do, it would be extremely costly. So that means most
Yeah.
people would not be subjected to that level of surveillance because it would just cost too much money. Whereas now it is a lot easier to know almost everything everyone does at a fraction of the cost that was the case in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of actual resources put into surveillance, the GDR was very much up there in terms of like most obsessively or most obsessive government in terms of spying on its citizens, and
Mhm.
the Stasi had so many volunteer or like not actually volunteers, but like people who were like pressured into becoming informants. Um,
Collaborators, yeah.
yeah, basically anyone could report your suspicious activities to the Stasi. It could be your next door neighbor. It could be anyone basically,
Mhm.
even your own children.
Mhm.
Like that's not just something that happened in 1984. It also happened in reality.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely. A friend of mine was reported by his nephew in the 80s to the Securitate. Yeah, it did happen. Absolutely, it
yeah,
did happen.
yeah. So
Yeah, but
should we go?
so to sum up, it is in if it is solely on the topic of whether the hotel should disclose that information, no, it shouldn't. The court is absolutely right on that. But in moral terms, some sort of solution for the kid to know his father, even if it will come another 5 years from now, or even 10 years from now, some sort of solution on that front should be found, but in a way that doesn't entitle the mother to back payments and the basically all sorts of extortion shackles. Because when you pull this kind of crap, you kind of take some responsibility. And I know that's sexist to say, but biology is sexist and reality is sexist, and you have to take some responsibility for the things you do.
Yeah, and I mean the whole current legal situation that the woman gets to hold all the cards. Like she gets to decide whether the father is involved at all. She gets to decide whether even to have the child, and if she has the child, whether to give it up for adoption without even letting the father know. Um, and then she still can just come around after a couple of years and say, "Oh, by the way, you owe me lots of money,"
Yeah, yeah.
and that's not right.
it's not right and it is unreasonable. So in that respect, that's why I said I don't have much sympathy for her. Oh my God, I can't charge my child support. Well, tough, very tough. All right, let's go. Oh, the next one is. Go ahead, please.
Next one is from the Tagesspiegel. Is the tax form misogynist? These days, many German citizens are occupied with doing their taxes. The forms have to be filled in and submitted to the finance authority by the end of May, and time grows short. Not a lot of fun, neither for men nor for women. But many female taxpayers' annoyance is increased by the forms. For married couples who file jointly, the man is always listed first, while the woman is relegated to the second rank, even if she earns more than her husband. While politicians fight for equal treatment of men and women in the workforce and in society, tax forms reek of the spirit of the post-war era. This doesn't only rankle wives who've been sensitized to questions of gender when they're doing the joint tax statement, but also the Greens and the Society of Taxpayers. Quote, "It is high time for women to also be seen as equal in the minds of tax workers." Lisa Paus, a spokeswoman for tax policy of the Greens parliamentary faction, told the Tagesspiegel. If she didn't see it as the most pressing tax issue in the world, a gender neutral monetization of the forms would nevertheless be, quote, "an important symbol," the fiscal expert opined. Skipping a bit here, but things aren't quite so simple, says the Federal Finance Authority. Joint filing does require differentiation so that persons can be unambiguously identified throughout the whole process and from year to year. The order established by the existing forms guarantees such an identification. But this order should, quote, "not be interpreted as a normative ranking or a form of discrimination," the ministry's spokesman emphasized. Recognizing gender issues is very important to the Federal Finance Authority. Skipping a bit more about where there's a couple of paragraphs where I talk about how that might be implemented, and onto the last paragraph. But that seems to be a Herculean task, namely like rearranging all the forms and so on. The working income tax, tax working group. Oh, sorry, that's the income tax working group that should be in charge, has estimated 2,800 person days merely to analyze the problem. Only after that would it be possible to estimate how high the cost for the actual change would be. The only thing apparent right now is that they would be high. Thus, a realization within the next 3 years was unlikely, the experts say.
This pretty much sums up the epitome of first world problems. And not just first world problems, but first world ignorance. So instead of talking whether the taxes are too high, which they indeed are, we're debating who's listed first on the tax form, uh, and instead of the authorities to just tell them, you're insane, go fuck yourself, they're like, oh yeah, but it would cost several thousands of person hours, and then we can tell you, and maybe in the next 5 years. And what? What? Really? Ew.
It's just as a matter of fact, like someone has to go first. Like there has
Yeah.
to be some sort of order. It's the order doesn't imply some sort of valuation. It's just an arbitrary order. And if it's decided, okay, it's the man first and the woman.
Yeah. So,
It's
I mean,
as good as order as any, and it's like having like some order is just like convenient for identification purposes. So otherwise, you'd have to have like probably the form would have to be more complicated, and we'd have
yeah.
to add extra items there and some sort of identification number maybe, and we'll just get more complicated. And of course, you have to change all the forms and all the like electronic programs that are based on the existing forms and so on.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work that's needless. Everything gets needlessly complicated because the feminists in the Green Party have a fistfight about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's just a sort of meaningless symbol politics that just it's not about helping any actual women. It's um, just basically like a symbol of, like, we are fighting for women. We have women's interests at heart. Um, and it's all about that sort of symbolism. It's not about actually changing any sort of meaningful policies.
mhm,
And
mhm.
quite a lot of what goes for gender politics these days is about these kinds of issues where it's completely irrelevant, like changing street names to have more female street names and such. Like, who actually cares about that? Very,
Yeah,
very few people.
yeah. I'm just thinking. I mean, you can go into this incredibly irrelevant debate even further and say, look, um, we cannot change it to make it to list women first. So the best compromise would be a randomized, order, and in that case, you have to have basically two entirely different set of forms depending on how the random.org generator would decide for every single household. And yeah, let's have we and that means more bureaucrats to sort that thing out after the random.org generator decides things. uh, yeah, I don't know what the hell do these people are smoking, and whatever they're smoking, it should be illegal. Amazing, amazing. I'm sorry, I can't take this seriously. I just can't.
Yeah, very few people actually take that seriously. Like, I mean, it's a sort of thing that if you're like some sort of public official, you can't just publicly poo-poo that, because that might be dangerous for your career. But like any normal person you ask in the street is going to say that's ridiculous.
It is a bit sad though that you can't do that as a public official. Uh, I think it should. There was something very similar in this country a few years ago, before we had this show, and the Minister of Finance just came out on TV and said that this is absolutely retarded. Opinion dismissed. Get lost. Uh, and there were no consequences for his career. And I think that should be the absolute norm. I mean, come on, you can't really come and suggest these kinds of things, and then normal people within the system can't just say you're a loon. I mean, they should be able to say that,
Yeah.
consequence
Well, I
free,
mean, I guess
basically.
that's just political correctness.
Yeah,
And
nah,
we're quite a bit farther away along the way there, and compared to
yeah.
Eastern Europe.
hmm Sadly,
Maybe you
yeah.
get there in a couple of decades.
Unless the PC schmucks die in the meantime. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm involved in all these things. I mean, I'd rather have this fight far away and not on the streets of my town. That's basically it.
You'd
All
rather have a
right.
couple of satellite countries.
Sorry.
You'd rather have a couple of satellite states.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd rather have these
It's a
kinds of
buffer zone.
yeah. I'd rather have these kinds of discussions um, be argued on the internet. Uh, and experimented on some other countries, not on mine. Because if these kinds of things were to be in place, say, in this country, I'll probably be fined every single day. And I already got prepared for that, and I'm slowly considering getting a Ukraine residence permit because it's easier if you know one of their official languages, and one of those is Romanian, so it's not that complicated. Just in case these kinds of things happen, and if they start finding me for hate speech and whatnot, I'm like, I don't live here. Get lost. All right, let's go to the next one. I'm sorry, I really cannot take this seriously.
Yeah, the next one is not particularly to be taken seriously either. Next one is from Austria, from Der Standard. Advertising Council condemns Osterhöschen. Palmer's order to cease and desist immediately. And it's about an ad with like a couple of women clad only in knickers, lying on their backs, um, and it's subtitled unsere Osterhöschen. And Ostern is what do you call it? Completely blanking on the word right now. It's Easter. Easter. It's Easter. Ostern is Easter, and Höschen is knickers, but Höschen sort of sounds like Häschen, which is bunny. So it's like the Easter bunny, sort of the bunnies as in like Playboys, sort of, and that's the ad.
That's a
Okay,
cute pun.
yeah, it's kind of a cute pun, but it's also degrading and so on. Let's continue with the article. The Austrian Advertising Council has cast its worst possible verdict on Parma's subject Osterhöschen. The self-regulating authority has demanded that Parma's, quote, immediately cease or alter the campaign. The reason, quote, the models in the ad are portrayed in a sexualized and degrading manner, are suggestive of being underage, and are there purely to catch the eye. Even though there is in principle a relation to the product, the ad plays with connotations that are unacceptable even with ads for underwear. The display is especially degrading through the combination of the image and its caption. As, quote, as Österhöschen, the models are either reduced to their underwear or equated with Easter bunnies, which in the context has to obviously be interpreted in a sexual way and bears no relation to the product. And then it's just like another 5 paragraphs of
Going
indignation,
on.
which I didn't all translate those because it's like more or less the same.
Oh my god, it's purely to catch the eye. Yes, it's an ad for lingerie. Of course, it's about catching the eye. I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
They're
it's like
basically describing, oh my god, these people dare to make an efficient ad campaign for a product, and we cannot have that.
it's a violation of human dignity, and it's a degrading display of sexuality, uh, and it's a discriminating display, and it's gender discrimination and sexist, and uh,
Even if all of that were true, so what? It's not, but even if that were true, so what?
yeah, and it's also a display of um, submission and exploitation, and um, it's normalizing violence, and um,
It's a lingerie ad. I mean, really? Yeah, and it promotes or normalizes submission. Yeah, so what's so wrong about submission? And again, this is Germany, a place that is sorry, it's Austria, a place that is very okay most of the time with Islam, which also normalizes submission. So again, what's so wrong about that? As for violence, again, it's a fucking lingerie ad. Really? Violence, lingerie ad? Yeah, maybe the self-regulating authority is just full of shit.
yeah, it's
Amazing. Amazing. What is this? The Silly Place show?
I just want to I'll post the actual image into the chat.
Okay.
I mean, it's yeah, it's like sexually provocative and so on, but I mean, come on, it's not exploitative. It's
Yeah. What's the problem with it? They even have like, racial diversity in it, so they should be happy. Seriously, what's the problem? I mean, I can understand an argument made against this on religious grounds, more precisely on Puritan grounds. But on secular grounds, yeah, it kind of makes no sense whatsoever to argue against this. And what was there? It suggests that the models are underage. Uh, yeah, neither it doesn't. But then again, even if it were, so what?
Yeah, it's also like another point is that it's body shaming because these models are too thin, and promotes an unhealthy body type and so on. Which I
I
mean they
think
are thin, but
I think the Austrian Medical Association would disagree with the unhealthy thing.
I don't think they're underweight.
Yeah, no,
They
I don't
look
think that
like they're
either.
really like slim and fit, and I don't know.
That's why I'm saying I think the Austrian Medical Association would disagree with the unhealthy part. I think the Austrian Medical Association would rather say that it is very healthy. Uh, and again, if it is body shaming, yeah, so what? Again, even if that were true, I still have to ask, yes, so what?
Yep.
Amazing, amazing. Uh, now, and the sad part is that this kind of thing is spreading. I mean, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, there were only some very, very old people who would try to regulate some campaigns on cable TV, basically. And everyone else was pretty much free to do whatever they damn pleased. But nowadays, these kinds of small bureaucracies that enforce some utterly nonsensical regulations on ads. It's usually city halls. It's rare to have national bodies, but usually city halls, and they they seem to be working pretty much in lockstep, which is a sign that stupidity is a disease that is contagious. Um, with pretty much same arguments. I mean, on the same grounds, they banned similar ads on London subway, in public displays on Rome, in Stockholm, and what was the last one that we covered in Paris? I think. Uh, it is just annoying. I can imagine that being the company whose ads have to be pulled because some bureaucrats decided so, it's even more annoying. But it's annoying to me. I'll never buy these the lingerie sold by these people. But nevertheless, it is annoying, and it is in many ways stifling free speech. I mean, why do you care? If you don't like it, don't buy their stuff, and their campaign would become inefficient, and therefore they would have to adapt to a new market. But that's the thing, the bureaucrats probably know that their campaign is efficient and that the overwhelming majority of the populace disagrees with them, so that's why they hand these the kinds of verdicts down in a very authoritarian manner. And I'm sorry, I'm not buying the excuse, oh, but it's a self-regulatory agency, it's not the state. Yeah, give me a break. Stifling free speech is still stifling free speech. Buzz off.
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of these self-regulating things by industry, it's they've adopted this sort of self-regulating body so that they don't get regulated by the government. Basically, they know that if they don't have this sort of body, or if they're not part of that, then they're going to get regulated by the government. So they just take that as sort of the lesser evil.
I still think it's evil, and especially I think it's evil when adherence to that particular body is not voluntary, because for instance, in Italy and here and in France and basically in the Latin countries, there's the local press club, and it has certain regulations and whatnot, and you get some perks by being a member there, but membership is voluntary, and if you can be a press agency without being a member of that particular club. And yes, you don't get the perks, but you also don't get their regulations, and that's fine. But as you said, in certain industries, and presumably the advertising industry too, uh, you're basically not allowed to exist if you're not a member of their monopolistic club that is somehow adopted by the biggest players in order to avoid being regulated by the government, maybe. Although in some countries, I don't know the case in Austria, but in some countries such as Norway, these kinds of quote unquote independent clubs are usually funded by the government in the first place, or mandated by the government.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how the nature of that body is in Austria, so
Nevertheless,
I don't even know if
never,
it is actually mandatory to be part of that self-regulatory body.
if it's not mandatory, then I guess the next step of these lingerie guys would be to just drop their club. And simply avoid their ban. But nevertheless, morally speaking, their argument is just silly.
Yep.
Uh, oh my God, the models appear underage, and it's sexualizing it. Yeah, young people are sexual beings too. And no, if just because you think they appear underage, that doesn't mean they are. And again, none of your business. Amazing. I mean, they sound barely distinguishable from the old religious right Puritans, don't they?
Yeah, they basically are religious Puritans. It's just a different religion.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. There is a website called, I think, Secular Right, which is been active for several years now, and they always write about the religious left. When I discovered it first, almost 10 years ago, I thought, yeah, maybe that's a bit of a stretch. I no longer think that. I think the guys there were very much on point when they were talking about the religious left. This is pretty much the religious left.
Yep.
All right. On the other hand, so now we defended public semi nudity and whatnot, but then there can be an extreme for that too. And here's the extreme coming from the other end, coming from the NRK, the state news agency and TV station in Norway. It's not a big deal for children to be watching porn. Yes, that's a legitimate title. Gro Dale is not afraid to provoke when she and her daughter will publish a children's book about pornography. I had no idea how common it is that children are watching porn, says Gro Dale. The critically acclaimed author, with more than 60 books behind her, is visiting her daughter, Kaja Dale Nyhus, at Grünerløkka in Oslo. Kaja is an illustrator and is doing well with the image material of the new book they made together. The porno book, like the mom and daughter are laughingly calling it. Children need a book about porn, says Gro, and gets a recognizable nod from Kaja. The author refers to a Swedish survey in 2014 which revealed that 9 out of 10 boys and 3 out of 10 girls use pornography. That means porn is a bigger part of the children's culture than its children's books. Thus, it is time to start talking about it, she said. Gro Dale is not afraid to write about difficult topics. Already in 2003, she created a lot of debate with the picture book Sinna Man, a story about a father who became violent. Some librarians put the book on high shelves so the children could not get it, Gro said. Nobody had anything to argue against the literary quality. Several literary critics believed that Sidna Man was the best picture book of the year. But was it really appropriate for children? The Evening Post critic, Kaya Kushvold, was one of those who asked that questions. Perhaps this is too strong for the ordinary child. Perhaps the one living alive and living a good life and safe with or without a dad may be scared of the message of Sindaman. It would be exciting to hear a professional's take about this. Neither then nor now Gro agrees with that conclusion. Of course, every kind of child can read Sinnaman. I have not met a single child who has been afraid of that book. There are, however, more adults who have gone out of the room after reading lessons at schools and libraries, says Gro, before she asks, do you know what happens when I get to the worst parts of the book Sinnaman? And the reporter says, no, I don't. And she says, well, the children start laughing. Gro also laughs a lot. For example, she's laughing when asked if it is challenging to write about difficult topics like incest, neglect, violence, and conflicting divorces. I think it's fun, she exclaims. Yes, or maybe more exciting, corrects Kaya from the couch. Yeah, exciting is probably a better word, admits Gro. In what way is it exciting? Asks the reporter. It's exciting to go where it is dangerous. I experience it a bit like many children do when they go into a dark basement. Through my books, I get the opportunity to come down to them and turn on the light. I'll comfort those who have trouble than those who have bad secrets, says Go. She's constantly getting new evidence that there are many of these children around in Norway. After several readings, little children have come to her and said they recognized themselves in her books. Many of these kids are keeping up with bad secrets for years, Gro emphasizes. Children need a language for the difficult experiences. Gro does not mind secrets, but the dangerous and bad secrets they do need to talk and write about, she believes. You must not forget that children also need a language for their experiences, and they need to know that they're not alone, she adds. Gro believes that children's relationship with porn can be one of these secrets, as children do not quite know how to talk to adults about. Do you really think anyone is being provoked by putting out a children's book about porn? Asks the reporter. No, not really. When I released The Octopus, which is a picture book on abuse of children, by the way. Anyway, when I released The Octopus last year, I did not get one negative comment. It has happened a lot over the past 15 years. People are more open to these kinds of books now. But I'm not afraid to provoke. If people get angry reading my books, then the important themes are being discussed, she adds. Kaya, on the other hand, has the feeling that there may be some negative reactions when a picture book on porn is released in August. No one is being provoked to show that incest, maternity leave, or domestic violence comes with issues, but more will surely react to saying that it's okay for children to watch porn, she says. Grow, however, must correct her. I do not think anyone thinks it's okay for kids to watch porn. My opinion is that it's not dangerous. I've heard from several experts. But of course, it is about context and situation. If children see porn or show porn of adults or older children as part of a sexual situation, this can go beyond the limit of abuse or incest, and then it's dangerous in a completely different way. How does one of the illustrations in Sesame Sesame, that's the name of her new book coming out in August, look like? Be serious that porn is a major part of the children's culture. That's the basic message of all the images. The porn book, scheduled for release in August, has been named Sesame Sesame. It's about Al, who will use the computer after the big brother has used it. Then, to his great surprise, he ends up in a world full of tits, butts, and giant, huge tits, and more tits. But when the mother surprises him in the room, he does not get a lecture or an argument. She explains that it's common to watch porn, that it's allowed for many to watch porn, both boys and girls. There's nothing dangerous at all, she says, smiling a little, but it can give a distorted, a nice picture of sex, she adds. Many children do not have such a safe adult home, but in Sesame Sesame, the mother can be such a person for the children, adds Grodale. So, are you really saying that porn is not dangerous at all? Asked the reporter. Well, the experts I've talked with say it is not dangerous. They say there are no surveys that show children getting trauma after looking at porn, but that it can lead to poor self-esteem or a skeptical view of sexuality, says Guo. Then it is harmful, adds her daughter, because it's not good to get bad self-esteem. You may think that it may be harmful if you do not speak properly about it, she adds. Go must agree with her daughter. Yeah, that is indeed true. And that's what I wanted with this book. The adults need to get serious and understand that porn is so much part of today's culture. We have to talk to the kids about what they see on the internet, she says, skipping a bit more. Now, children have a completely different knowledge. Everybody knows what's going on. They teach it at school or they learn it from their parents or an older sibling, or stumble over it online, she says. One thing at least is clear to Go. When children will read Sesame Sesame, it will not be their first experience with porn. So,
So just to be clear, this is a picture book that is a book aimed at very young children.
yes,
Like what is like the age group here?
4 to 10.
Okay, like if it's aimed at 10-year-olds, I can understand it, because if you're 10, chances are you've encountered porn before in some form, and it might be helpful to have some sort of book that talks about it. But as a 4-year-old, I don't know.
Yeah, the thing is that, and this is as much of a problem of this article and as much as um, the Norwegian language itself, because it doesn't have differentiated words. Basically, everyone under the 18 is barred child, which is problematic because there is a substantive difference, especially when it comes to these kinds of topics between a 14-year-old and a 6-year-old. I would see no problem whatsoever with a book or a magazine or whatever cultural material about porn aimed at 14-year-olds. But one aimed at 6-year-olds, yeah, maybe not.
I
Maybe
mean,
not.
a 14-year-old usually is sexually mature.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
uh, I mean, it's perfectly normal for 14-year-olds to want to look at porn. I don't think it's harmful for a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
Um, like maybe certain kinds of porn might be harmful, but it's always very difficult to prove that sort of thing. Um, but if you're talking about 4-year-old, 6-year-olds, I also don't know how harmful it might be, but maybe that's something that should be avoided. And of course, obviously, it depends on like how the book works. If it deals with this sort of topic in a sensitive way, I of course don't know. Not having read it. Um, But
Yeah,
the idea that it's like a perfectly normal and fine for like a 6-year-old to look at porn, I don't know about that.
yeah, that's why I said before starting reading it that there's such thing as extremism from the other side. Um, it's one thing to introduce some nuance, and there is such thing as teenage sex, and maybe we shouldn't be that rigid on set and things like, oh my god, a 16-year-old was videotaped doing something, come on, let's jail everyone for child porn. Yeah, that's silly. Now that's one aspect. On the other hand, going as low as making children's books for 4 or 5 or 6 year olds about porn, yeah, that's not only silly, but I think that's very extreme. I mean, open-mindedness, but not to the point where your brains fall out, or you know what I'm saying, on the sidewalk.
Yep.
Of course, we'll have to wait and see the book. Probably I'll pirate it when it comes out in August. Maybe it's not really that extreme, but considering that this is still Gro Dale, who has quite a history of putting uh, quote unquote controversial topics in children's books. Um, and when they don't ask her on in this particular interview, but in other interviews she's been asked if she's a feminist, and she's like, yeah, maybe not, I don't know. uh, but if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then probably most likely is a duck. And her book about domestic violence, cinnamon, is remarkably misandristic or misandric, and remarkably congruent with the view of more likely British feminists than Swedish feminists. So I guess it's not really 100% insane, just 97% insane. Uh, but nevertheless, considering the author, I do expect the worst from the book. And I don't know. I mean, in this particular kind uh, um, of impetus, I guess, to smash down all the barriers. I mean, think about it this way: in Sweden and to a certain extent in Norway, we would have public displays of pornography like in late '60s and early '70s. When and this was true in East Germany, to a lesser extent in West Germany, and to no extent whatsoever in most of Europe and North America. The rest of us were far more puritanical than them. But then again, it made sense in the '70s um, to undermine a little bit the extreme puritanical view of sex. But on the other hand, this impetus to criticize any sort of societal consensus when it comes to public sexuality. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe some norms are there and have been surviving for quite a lot of time for a reason. They're tested and they work. Whereas I'm not sure that it is necessarily a good thing to have in the future a society where it's considered acceptable for 6 year olds to watch porn. I think that's a bit extreme.
Yeah, and I do think we should like tend to err on the side of caution there.
Hmm.
Um, like maybe it's not actually harmful for a 6-year-old to watch porn, but like what actually is the benefit?
Hmm.
Um, and if there isn't any like strong benefit, and it might well be harmful, then probably like probably don't do that. Probably just err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want the government to ban it, uh, because then again you're using violence to prevent people from doing what they want, and there you should definitely err on the side of caution, the other direction of not inflicting violence on peaceful people, just because they do things that might be harmful to themselves. Um, but in terms of like I do think it's appropriate for parents of like little children not to let them look at porn.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and the discussion has to be in cultural terms rather than government, because that's what Mrs. Guo has been doing for so many years. I mean, it's very hard, it's very rare to see her or to read anything written by her talking about the government should or the government shouldn't. She's almost always in the business of subverting the culture, essentially. And I know that sounds sinister because, well, most of the times it actually is, but nevertheless, I mean, she's arguing in cultural terms, so the response should be in cultural terms rather than governmental policy. That's why, for instance, I have utter disdain for the parents who say, "Oh, the government must step in and filter the internet." And no, you're a parent, and oh my God, but think of what the children will see on the internet. Yes, you're the parent. You filter it for your own household. Uh, so yeah, and but again, subverting the culture to the extent of convincing maybe not existing parents but future parents. Uh, I don't think that's something that should go so unchallenged. And uh, sorry, but sadly in Norway it might go because I can't imagine the NRK being willing to publish a rebuttal to this kind of discourse.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see until the book comes out, and then probably review the book again when it will come out.
Yeah, maybe we'll get the situation where in the English-speaking world it would be child abuse to show porn to your young child, and in the Scandinavian world it might become child abuse not to show porn to your young child. That would be quite fun.
Well, there are already several differences in the. I mean, on all topics that come to not children but teenage sex, the Scandinavians and the German-speaking world are far more liberal than the English-speaking world. And the French, to a certain extent, especially in cultural terms. I mean, think about it this way: the French just elected a guy president, uh, whom in the United States would be a victim of rape, basically.
Yep.
So, or in Ireland for that matter. Um, so yeah, I mean, there are already, and this will all well, not always, but will definitely be a conflict between people like us and the English speaking natives in the wider non-feminist community, because most of Europe is far less puritanical than the English speaking world. With that said, I have this feeling that the Scandinavian world is trying to go way too far with that. I mean, it's fine to be more liberal on sexual matters. In fact, I think it's probably desirable. But going that far low, well, I think that's probably as evil as raising generations of sexually frustrated teens.
Yep.
All right, let's go to the next one. Coming again from the archives of Iceland, from the Independent. Netflix removes chromosome explanation of sexes from Bill Nye, the cringe guy. Sorry, the science guy. Netflix appears to have removed a segment from a 1996 episode of Bill Nye the Cringe Guy that attributes biological sex to chromosomes. The original broadcast of the episode, entitled Probability, saw a young woman explain, quote, "I'm a girl, could have just as easily been a boy though, cause the probability of becoming a girl is always 1 in 2. Well, actually, that's not exactly true. There are 107 boys for every 100 girls. But anyway, inside each of our cells are these things called chromosomes, and they control whether we become a boy or a girl. Your mom has two X chromosomes in all of her cells, and your dad has one X and one Y chromosome in each of his cells, she continues. Again, with the exception of your father's sperm cells. But anyway, before you're born, your mom gives you one of his chromosomes. Seriously, the Independent. And your dad gives you one of his. Mom always gives you an X, and if dad gives you an X too, then you become a girl. But if he gives you an Y, then you become a boy. See, there are only two possibilities. The chance of becoming either one is always 1 in 2, a 50-50 chance either way. It's like flipping a coin. Netflix has yet to clarify the reason for the edit, but it was likely made due to Nye, quote, embracing gender fluidity on his new Netflix show, Bill Nye Saves the World. I mean, it pretty much sounds like he embraced Islam or something. Oh, he embraced gender fluidity. Really? I mean, this is and many people use Orwellian in the wrong way, but this is Orwellian. In the it is down the memory hole,
Yep.
basically. We've always been at war with Oceania. Uh, no, you haven't. Amazing. This I think is a very worrying trend. I mean, at the end of the day, sure, Netflix is a private company, and Bill Nye can do whatever he wants with his show and the rights holders and whatnot. So I'm not making a legal argument here, but I'm making a cultural and moral argument. This is a very dangerous trend.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
It's just I feel like it's fundamentally dishonest, and like an honest way would be to say, yeah, I've changed my mind, and this is what I said in the old program, but I don't no longer believe that. That would be honest. I mean, he would be wrong, but at least he would be honest.
Mhm.
But as it is, just like deleting it without comment, that just seems quite fishy. And now that being said, the actual explanation offered in that old episode is like hilariously wrong. Like it's wrong in terms of biology, it's wrong in terms of mathematics and logic. Um, I've actually watched that part of the episode, which can of course be found on the internet because the internet doesn't forget.
Yeah, the internet
Um,
is forever.
and basically, what the explanation is that there's two possibilities, XX and XY, which first of all that's wrong. That's like a minor point. There's also like you could have like triple X, you could have X Y Y. There's various different possibilities, which are sort of rare. But I mean that's sort of a minor point that they're not going into all the other type of chromosomal arrangements. But even ignoring all of that, so the explanation they give is that it's like from your father you get either an X or a Y, and therefore it's 50-50, which is completely wrong, like completely and
Yeah.
utterly wrong. It would be 50-50 if half the cells were with X and half the cells with Y, but it's not the case.
Yeah.
And also additionally, if the X and the Y cells are like equally likely of being chosen and so on. If all of that is equal, then it's 50-50. But it's just because there's two possibilities doesn't mean it's 50-50. That's just
Mhm.
completely completely wrong. And this show was supposed to be about teaching children about probability, and that's exactly the wrong way of going about it. Just because
Yeah.
there's two possibilities doesn't mean it's 50-50.
Yeah.
Not everything is evenly distributed.
Yeah, and if it wasn't about teaching probability, but rather basic biology for 6-year-olds, I would have probably been less critical of it, because at the end of the day, Bill Nye is not a scientist. Let's be clear about that, and he's been wrong on science multiple times. And the reason not most people, but a significant chunk of people uh, tend to still hold some degree of appreciation for this cringy dude is because he's popularizing some basic science to children, or he used to, because he's not no longer doing that. He's now popularizing uh, basic progressivist ideology uh, to not to children anymore, but to rather young adults and late teens, uh, and also cringy content overall. But in the past, it was this thing. Oh well, at least he's uh, giving the basics to 6-year-olds or 7-year-olds and whatnot, and then they'll learn the minutiae in school or on the internet later on in life, which I guess it's a fair argument. But then again, as you said, this is a show supposed to teach um, the basics of probability, in which case it's no longer acceptable to present such a basically wrong argument, because
Yeah,
it's not just it's simplistic, it's wrong.
it's also like a really dumbed down show. Like
Yeah.
I've never watched Bill Nye the Science Guy before. I just um, in preparation talking about this article, I've watched like a couple of minutes of this particular show. Like in the beginning, they have this sort of setup where there's like three doors and only one of them will lead to the laboratory where they have to go. And when I saw this at first, I thought they were talking about using the Monty Hall problem as sort of an an illustration of interesting probability theory stuff, but no, it was actually just like a setup for some slapstick where like he opens the door and like someone punches him in the balls or something, and like, like finally he opens the last door and like he goes through and like he falls down and lands in an alley somewhere. Like has nothing to do with probability. It's just like cheap slapstick humor.
Yeah, this is why the Bill Nye the cringe guy is very appropriate. Most of his content is cringe. It's just that the modern day culture is slowly starting to realize just how cringy this guy is. And for many years, people like me who said, "Look, this is just cringe, and it's mostly crap, and you shouldn't be feeding that to your child because it's just crap." People like me were like, "Oh, you're bigoted, you're anti-science," and I'm like, "No, I'm not anti-science, but I am anti-cringe." And in the past, it was a much more controversial argument to make, whereas now, after Bill Nye embraced Islam. Sorry, I mean gender fluidity. It's become a lot more acceptable to just say, "Come on, this guy is just cringe." I mean, have you seen the excerpts that are flowing around the internet of his latest show, Bill Nye Saves the World? Spoiler alert: he doesn't. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
I've seen that particular thing with this kind of song or dance where
my vagina
it's
has a
about
voice.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And seriously, for anyone listening, if you haven't seen this, do watch it before you eat, not after you eat, because you might throw up. Um, look it up on YouTube. My vagina has a voice, and enjoy the cringe. Trigger warning: extreme cancer. Don't say I didn't warn you, but nevertheless, you probably should watch it just to see how degenerated the shows made by Bill Nye have become. I mean, at the very least, this 1996 show was, partly wrong scientifically speaking and a bit cringy and whatnot, but it wasn't pure cancer. The 2017 show is just pure cancer. I mean, it just is. And thankfully, we're in a period uh, where children or teenagers are far less willing to believe stuff just because it comes from a figure of authority. Thank God for that, because otherwise I would have been even more worried. Because what this guy is promoting and what other essentially progressive propagandists in the culture are promoting is extremely dangerous. This business of gender fluidity is very dangerous. We covered, what was it, on the last episode or 2 episodes ago, with the Austrian clinician Australian clinician who said that he's getting more and more teens who want to try out being a tranny and things like that. All of these things are happening because of this kind of cringe being promoted in the culture.
Yeah, I think it was on the last show that, and it is indeed dangerous.
And again, just because there aren't too many cases yet, although there are definitely a lot more than 25 years ago, it still is dangerous because that Australian clinician sees the very extreme cases, but there are also the less extreme but still very dangerous cases where they don't necessarily go to a clinician, but nevertheless still adopt behaviors and values that will end up being toxic for them. I mean, at the end of the day, and I know this sounds very triggering, but still, all of these teens who adopt very toxic and retarded ideas, either in college or in their high school, influenced by Tumblr or whatnot, one day they'll have to try to get a job, and that's when they'll hit a very, very cruel reality. Because if all your qualifications are that you know the perfect correct pronouns of all the 59 genders, sorry, that's not a marketable skill. It's just not. I mean, that even from a purely economic standpoint, these kinds of trends are dangerous. Not to mention from a societal and psychological standpoint, where they're definitely dangerous.
Yeah,
For the Go ahead.
imagine going to a job interview and like the first thing is to introduce yourself and um, tell the interviewer your pronouns and then ask the interviewer his or like zero preferred pronouns. That might go well.
Yeah, that might go. And in most cases, you might end up meeting an interviewer who is like 50 years old, and the interviewer might be, yeah, we'll call you back. The door is that way. Get the fuck out of my office. But yeah, no, amazing, amazing, and basically, and Bill Nye is a symptom. I mean, if anything, he's late to the party. I mean, this kind of insanity and lunacy has been going on for over a decade now, and it's gotten more and more extreme as years gone by. So, if anything, Bill Nye is late to the party, but nevertheless, he's a symptom to probably reaching or even slightly surpassing peak political correctness. I mean, the amount of negative reaction this thing got was unimaginable 5 years ago. So in a way, I don't know, maybe I'm a bit too optimistic, but so some people are saying that we've already passed peak political correctness, and it's just the maximum it can get, and it's slowly starting to get downhill. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but nevertheless, the negative reactions are much stronger than they used to be.
Yeah, and I just love the hybris of calling your show "Bill Nye Saves the World."
Yeah.
If you're a scientist, the ideal is that you're supposed to be humble and self-critical and so on, but there's not a shred of humility there.
It's not because, well, for starters, again, Bill Nye is not a scientist.
Yeah, he's an engineer who played a scientist on TV for a kid show.
Yeah, basically. I mean, there are, there is the guy who plays guitar in the rock band Queen is much more of a scientist than he is. I mean, at the very least, that guy has a PhD in microbiology. So, just saying. Brian May, that's the guy I'm talking about. But yeah, he's an engineer who played scientist on TV, which is fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. But at the very least, don't be cringy. But yes, this extreme hubris of calling your show after yourselves and say you yourself will save the world. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe you won't. Very likely you won't. But then again, it's a general trend that we're seeing on with progressive propagandists, whether they're scientists or not. This vulgar pride of intellectuals, the well, or pseudo intellectuals in the case of Bill Nye. They think of themselves as so enlightened over the rest of us plebs that they just started to forget that they're still basic humans like everyone else, and they're not really that special.
Yeah, and it's very symptomatic of political discourse that it's not at all about finding out what's actually true. It's just like you already know what the truth is. You already know how to save the world. Just need to convince all the other stupid people
Hmm.
that they should just get along with your program, and then everything will be fine.
Hmm. 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 Yeah,
If people would spend like a quarter of the effort they spend on proselytizing, on like actually thinking things through and questioning their own beliefs, things would look a lot better in this world.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
That's
for
true.
most people, politics is not about finding out what is actually true. It's more like sort of a spectator sport of cheering on your team, and
Mhm.
it wouldn't be half as fun if you're constantly questioning whether your team is actually the good guys or whether your team is actually doing a good job. It's just much more fun to just wave those flags and vilify the other teams and beat up their fans and so on.
In the case of the left, very literally, as the anti-fa have been showing to us, literally beating up the other team. But I don't know about the fun part. I mean, I find it fun to ask myself, what if you're wrong? Uh,
But you're weird.
Sorry.
But you're weird.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, yeah. That's a fair point, I guess.
Yeah, but I'm the same way. I often ask myself, what if I'm wrong? What if or what sort of assumptions am I making that are not justified? And I do very much enjoy reading a good argument from someone who's not on my side.
Mm.
Um, and but that's not like typical. Most people are not like that.
Yeah, well, most people are not like that, but the problem I guess is though is that unlike 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when you would see, for instance, very hardline leftists and even downright commies coming with in the same TV show with Thomas Sowell or Milton Friedman, and they would argue with each other, and for some reason they wouldn't physically beat up each other, and they wouldn't be terribly insulting each other. I mean, sure, they would make jokes at the expense of each at the expense of the other one, but they wouldn't insult each other. The left used to be more open to argument than it is now. Uh, for instance, whenever I say that I religiously read the Huffington Post, I religiously read Salon, and I do. I'm not joking. Um, as you're saying, there are many people who tell me, "Oh, you're weird," Be- and then I realized most leftists don't read at all places like Heat Street, from which we're going to read very soon, and much less so they would read Breitbart or things like that. They just don't do it ever.
Yeah, and meanwhile we have Bill Nye suggesting that maybe climate science deniers should be put in jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't outright say that it should be done, but he said it's sort of maybe that's a good idea. I
Hmm.
don't remember his exact words, but at least he's not. He
Yeah.
doesn't have the obviously reasonable reaction that's an insane suggestion. Of course, they shouldn't be put in jail.
Mhm. Yeah.
You have people suggesting that their ideological opponent should be locked up. Then you're really reaching dangerous territory.
Yeah, he says that he's open to the idea of jailing those who deviate from the change consensus. That was uh, the wording. The Inquisition much? I mean, there were many others who were very, very keen on jail terms for those who deviate from the church's consensus or from the whatever craftsman guild consensus and whatnot. Yeah, it's just that the collectivists among us are far less willing to even hear an argument, let alone have an argument with someone who disagrees with them, uh, and that's going to eventually lead to these kinds of all politically correct guys. It's going to lead to their downfall because sooner or later, and we're already seeing that, uh, more and more people are like, how about no? How about fuck you? I mean, you're not willing to argue anything, and you're gonna call me evil and bigot and racist and whatnot just for disagreeing with you on how many degrees has the temperature changed in the last 20 years or whatnot. Yeah, maybe fuck off.
Yep.
Because there's so much tolerance that normal people, I'm not saying conservative, I'm saying normal people, there's so much tolerance that normal people can have over someone calling them bigots for disagreeing with them. I mean, eventually even the most moderate normal person is going to say, yeah, maybe no, yeah, maybe we're done with the left. And I'm internally smiling on that development. Right. Going to the last one, also from the lunacy, similar with the previous one, coming from Heat Street, the Culture Wars section. Study describing breastfeeding as natural is unethical because it reinforces gender roles. It's ethically inappropriate for government and medical organizations to describe breastfeeding as natural because the term enforces rigid notions about gender roles, claims a new study in pediatrics. Coupling nature with motherhood can inadvertently support biologically deterministic arguments about the roles of men and women in the family, for example, that women should be the primary caretaker, the study says. The study notes that in recent years, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the World Health Organization, and several state departments of health have all promoted breastfeeding over feeding using the term natural. Referencing the natural in breastfeeding promotion may inadvertently endorse a set of values about family life and gender roles, which would be ethically inappropriate, the study says. Unless such public service announcements make transparent the values and belief that underlie them, they should quit describing breastfeeding as natural. But the study authors, Jessica Martucci and Anne Barnhill, clearly have in mind an alternative set of values, and beliefs about which they are not transparent. It's unclear whether they're worried about how traditional female gender roles may limit women's progress in the workforce, or whether this is part of the discussion about whether conventional views about motherhood exclude transgender people, or perhaps this is just another example of how the progressive obsession with gender and sexuality has permeated all fields of academic study. Regardless, Martucci and Barnhill mask their agenda by also making the unconvincing secondary argument that describing breastfeeding as natural fuels the anti vaccine movement. When public service announcements praise breastfeeding as natural, Martucci and Barnhill argue, the implication is that manufactured or mass produced products are questionable or dangerous. So these promotions may unintentionally encourage parents to reject scientific progress elsewhere. If doing what is natural is best in the case of breastfeeding, how can we expect mothers to ignore that powerful and deeply persuasive worldview when making choices about vaccination? They write. There's certainly an assertive worldview woven throughout this paper, though we find it neither powerful nor deeply persuasive. So, I introduced this particular piece of news in my regular Romanian language podcast, and the wife of the guy with whom I'm making the podcast, when she heard me reading, where actually I was translating this piece of news into Romanian, and she was like, "And where the hell is the kid going to suck from if he's not sucking from his mother's tit?" I mean, that's what normal people hear. That's normal people's reaction to these kinds of insanity. I mean, this guy's wife is not aware of progressivism and whatnot. And whenever you expose her to a progressive point, she's like, maybe we should call the psychiatric unit, the psychiatric facility. I mean, that's always her reaction. Um, so yeah, but still, I mean, describing breastfeeding as natural is unethical. Really? Uh, this thing with the anti-vaccine movement, this is what pissed me off when I was translating it into Romanian, because not only is it disingenuous, but it's downright wrong, and it's basically this elitist view of leftist intellectuals that most people are so fucking stupid that if you tell them that breastfeeding is natural and good, then most people will be completely incapable of making the difference between breastfeeding and vaccines, and then would for some reason all of them end up believing that vaccines not being natural, they will conclude therefore that they're unhealthy and bad, and therefore um, won't go to a hospital to subject their children to vaccination. This is a very elitist point of view, when in reality things are not happening that way. If anything, the most anti-vaccine areas tend to be the very wealthy and liberal and open-minded and woke places. It's not the poor conservative areas who tend to have a much higher vaccination rate.
In American terms, it's uh, people who vote for, say, the Green Party are
Mhm.
um,
Most
much more
skeptical of
likely
vaccines.
to be anti-vaxxers.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, even Jill Stein is sort of she was sort of ambiguous on the question. She didn't like want to outright. She like neither outright condemned vaccinations nor endorsed them. She was sort of um, taking this neutral position because she knows that many of her supporters are against vaccinations because they're unnatural,
Mhm.
and that's sort of the like little tiny image of truth um, in that feminist study or like or article or whatever it is, um, that it is not a good idea to conflate what is natural with what is good. Um, and concentrating on breastfeeding being natural is, I think, somewhat like it's obviously true it's obviously true, but that's not a very important point. Just because something is natural doesn't mean it's good. Um,
Yeah, but they're not
people
object.
dying of childbirth is also natural. It's something that happens all the time in the pre-industrial society, and but the reason breastfeeding is good is because, well, breastfeeding is because as of yet we haven't discovered some sort of baby formula that's superior to breast milk.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll discover something like that in the future. I think it's actually quite likely, but as of right now, even the best baby formula products are not quite as good as actual breast milk from the actual mother.
Yeah, and again, they're not arguing against the focusing on natural. They're very specific. They say
Yep.
describing it as natural is unethical because it promotes certain values and beliefs. End quote. So and this is what makes it lunacy, because not describing it as natural uh, would be just wrong, because it is. And most of the ads that they're complaining about, I mean, I've googled for the other podcast. I've googled some of them, and they say, look, and they're basically saying natural breastfeeding is good because, and then on the reasons, you never have
Hmm.
anywhere it's natural. No, it's natural. It's good because it has superior components and whatnot. It helps the child. Blah blah blah. But so they're complaining about it being described as natural because it's coupling nature with motherhood. Uh, and I'm like, yeah. And what's wrong with that?
Yeah, basically they're complaining about people making true arguments in favor of something that is ideologically inconvenient for them.
Basically, yeah. And if ideology and reality conflict, then reality must be wrong.
Yep.
Amazing, amazing. Um, yeah, and in the other podcast, I even made this argument that even if it were true that describing it as natural somehow endorses a set of values about family and about family life and gender roles and whatnot, even if all of that were true, I don't think it's true, but even if all of that would be true, uh, I still don't think it's a problem. Because as we always say on this show, much to the hatred of both feminists and MGTOWs, most people actually do prefer a traditional arrangement, and the traditional arrangement actually does work for most people. That doesn't mean non-traditional arrangements should be forbidden, but it does mean that one should acknowledge that the traditional arrangement, there is a reason it's called traditional, because it actually works for most people most of the time. So even if it were true that describing it as natural may inadvertently endorse a set of values, as these feminists are saying in their quote unquote study, even if that were true, I still don't think it's wrong.
Yeah, and I mean it's impossible to give any sort of advice without implicitly endorsing some sort of value system. I mean, even if you just give people advice in terms of you should breastfeed because it's good for the health of your child, that implicitly assumes the value system that's promoting the health of your child is a good thing. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe your child will grow up to be the next Hitler, then promoting the health of your child would be not a good idea. But we don't know that, and sort of in general, we assume that improving the health of your child is good. That's sort of our value system that we put in. That's not something we argue for. We just assume that at the start, and people do that all the time with lots of fairly uncontroversial um, value systems. And as long as it's not something that is like too outrageous, then that's fine. It's what you have to accept, because otherwise you can just never make any sort of normative statement.
hmm hmm Yeah, although you said normative, so that's triggering in itself. Um, um,
If I could interject just a second,
please do.
I might remind that Hitler was not someone who was really taken care of as a child.
And was a liberal
No,
school
he he
dropout.
he. No, I mean, as a young child, he really wasn't well taken care of. He didn't get any real
Neither was Anders
bonding.
Breivik, for that matter. Um,
So, in
yeah.
other words, you're saying
And
if you don't breastfeed, you might be responsible for genocide.
if no, what I'm saying is if you breastfeed, um, you might be able to build the type of familial bonds necessary to keep those types of things from happening. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, at the very
There's
least,
Just want to be non-controversial, do you?
well, it's a somebody who is neglected in their childhood is much more likely to grow up having severe disorders or to um, uh, have uh, psychopathy. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's definitely true. That we do have to take into account that there's a confounding factor that genetics might play in this. That you know, people with let's just call it quote unquote inferior genes are more likely to neglect their children, and so some of that um, higher propensity towards psychopathy and other sort of disorders might be due to bad genes passed on by the parents. That's
Yeah,
Sure,
but
sure. Some of it might very well be, and but what I'm saying is you are much more likely to ferret it out if you have a family structure that is actually focused in on bonding with the child. Uh, Everything from breastfeeding to playing catch in the yard.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? So you're much more likely to detect problems earlier because if you're not present as a parent, you don't know. You don't know what this kid's doing, or you don't know what this kid's feeling on the inside. You can't address issues because you're not there. You haven't bonded. You're not doing anything.
Yep.
And even if there was a genetic component, you'd be much more likely to catch the signs that it is uh, being made manifest.
and work to attenuate that somehow.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Uh, or at least tell the kid not to have any kids of his own.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess what you're saying is that if 7 out of 10 kids with bad genes go wrong, when if they're well taken care of, maybe that percentage can go much lower to maybe 3 out of 10. Uh, Basically,
Or
go
right,
ahead.
right. Or at the very least, you have all the information you need to be able to act
Hmm.
when things do go wrong.
Hmm.
Because you already know something's wrong.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm not saying you can cure someone of psychopathy. What I am saying is that you can mitigate the damage that they do. But if you have no idea what the heck is going on inside this kid, once he goes off the deep end, that's it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, because well, the almost all of the top neurosurgeons in the world are psychopaths, for instance, and they all share an almost identical quality. They all had a very, very, very caring family. Sure, not all of them, but most of them. Of the psychopaths that end up neurosurgeons instead of something else.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And I think that this is ridiculous. The whole idea of not having these breastfeeding is somehow not natural. I think that's bullshit. Um,
It's a
every
continuation of Tumblr ideology,
well,
basically.
look at every mammal
Yeah.
on the planet.
That's why they're called mammals.
Exactly. That's why they're called mammary glands. It's a distinctive feature of mammals. So to not have this seen as natural is just uh, yeah, it's bullshit. It's the same thing as um, saying all the rest of the stupid things that these Tumblrites like to say.
Yeah, but this is not coming from the Tumblr. That's that's why I regard it as very dangerous, because we've come from all of these stupidities we used to read and make fun of them on the internet in 2009 on Tumblr. Now you have them from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Uh, this kind of stupidity seeps in into mainstream science. And well, they complain that parents might reject scientific progress somewhere, well, blah blah blah. Well, you lefties are usually the main driver of that, because if mainstream science ends up being discredited as a bunch of militant leftists in most fields, which is already starting to be the case in some Western countries, uh, that's a lot more dangerous and a lot more likely to drive parents to reject scientific progress than any public service announcement put forth by the U.S. Department of Health that says breastfeeding is natural. Um, and one last thing that I need to say about this, there's quote unquote solution to this is unless such public service announcements make transparent the values and belief that underlie them, they should quit describing breastfeeding as natural. Okay, but then they themselves, the study's authors, do not make transparent their own values and beliefs. Uh, so I take it that they view themselves as being completely neutral and unjudgmental, as opposed to the plebs and bigots out there who think that humans are a sexually dimorphic species and there are things that are natural to women and are natural to men.
Yeah, basically. What leaked movie, non-leaked movie.
By biology, not real. I mean, really, that's what it boils down to, is this insipid notion that biology isn't real.
Yeah, this is why I keep on recommending to people to use basically leftist shaming tactics. And when you see these kinds of loons that, oh my god, breastfeeding is not natural, or there is no such thing as um, men and women because we're all on a spectrum and things like that, basically turn back the shaming and the politics at them and say, well, at least we're not biology denialists like your sorry lot. I mean, whenever you disagree with them on climate science, for instance, they call you a climate science denier, which is uh, basically there is no such thing. But call them back biology deniers, because they are. Bill Nye is a biology denier. Jessica Martucci and Ann Barnhill, who wrote this disdainful article, they're biology deniers. Maybe it's time we start playing this game too, because everyone can play this game, and if this is the culture we live in, maybe we should start using uh, its nastiness against basically the enemies of civilization.
I mean, calling them biology deniers is like a nice mere word, but it's not really any more accurate than calling people who don't agree with the quote unquote consensus on climate change as climate science deniers.
I didn't say it's true. I said it's efficient.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but
Well,
they certainly believe in biology in terms of they believe in evolution as long as it's like below the
stops at
neck,
the neck. Yep.
or as long as it's like in human prehistory, like before humans left or modern humans left Africa. As long as it's before that, then biology can play in humans, and you have human evolution and so on. That's all fine, but like after that, we just like stopped evolving somehow. Even though obviously we didn't, because we evolved lots of things since then, like say different skin colors and lactose tolerance and all these sorts of obvious biological
I see you're
factors.
a fan
But
of milk supremacy too. Okay. Can't be praised. Alrighty. Then I guess I'm out of things to say, except that I won't be here this Friday, May the 12th, because I'm covering the national convention of a political party here in Romania, and it's being held in this city, and it lasts for 3 days, and it's a mostly progressive party, so it's going to be extreme fun. Yeah, but basically, I want to cover them because no one else would. Most of the press either doesn't want to cover them, and those that do tend to be remarkably sympathetic to their progressive bollocks, and someone needs to cover them in a less progressive manner. And Therefore, I'll be doing that. Next show should be on May the 19th, unless one of you two has a business scheduled on that date.
Nope. So I guess we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Oh,
And
2 weeks, yeah.
yeah, that's right, in like a week and a half.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, take the red pill.
Take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone.